Right, hi, and welcome to the Mailbox. This is where I go through some of the statements that are sent to me or comments on videos on Twitter or Patreon or wherever, and go through some of the ones that require a little bit more of an in-depth explanation. And a couple of things first on Twitter. A few things, really. But the most interesting one I got tweeted today by Preach, so we'll see what comes of this one. But I did like the response that this elicited from someone. 2 Ret Paladins in their raid and no gnomes. Good man. I can now say the same. The last lingering gnome that was remaining in our roster has now changed to Night Elf. So my guild is also in a position where we've got 2 Rets and no gnomes. So getting on to some comments. First one, your sound isn't the best quality. Did you modify something? No, I didn't, but I know what you're talking about. It's really annoying. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully this is sounding better, not because I've changed anything, but because the Voice Meter Banana, which is the software for those who watch me stream, I have to use that to stream certainly my guild raids. And it's for some reason it started doing something really weird and I don't know what it is. So I've just gone through all the default settings now, taken Voice Meter out of the equation just for doing the videos. It's a bit of a pain in the arse having to keep, changing my settings to do videos and then do streaming. But hopefully at least sorts that problem out. Let me know if it is, by the way, because I can't always tell when I just listen to playback. Sometimes I can, and then sometimes it sort of sounds okay, and I'm not really sure. Next one. This was... again, about the video I did on what Exhausters had to say about Tomb of Sargeras, but in light of what Blizzard said in their Q&A just this week, is a bit more interesting. So this person saying, I think that the TOS overall showed that encounter design team completely have no idea what the tuning plan for the encounters tweet from meant more towards the lack of connection between the design team who created the mechanics and the team deciding the boss health, abilities, damage, blah, 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 blah. And I think you bang on the money there. And the reason why I say that, and I'm going to be talking about this in my video on what Blizzard said about raiding, is that what Ian Hazakostas mentioned, not so much related to the tuning. He did talk about that and he sort of agreed with the points that Method and Exhausters come up with. But more about the Tomb of Sargeras meme, the idea that on 8 out of the 9 fights, on Mythic mode at any rate, there are soak mechanics. And what Ian was saying was that basically, to cut a long story short, I'll explain it in more detail in the other video, but there was no one who had an overall picture of what was going on with the encounter design. So you had individual teams working on each boss, of course, and they all independently, or not all of them apart from Demonic Inquisition, I suppose, independently came up with soak mechanics, which basically indicates that there is no one person who on a day-to-day basis goes around the different teams and has an overall view of what's going on. Now, that's quite worrying in one way because you'd think that's an obvious thing to do. But at the same time, it's an easy fix just to point someone for that. And you don't need an extra layer of management for that. It doesn't need to be a manager who does that. It just needs to be someone who is going around getting an overall view of what's going on with the design and can perhaps report to a manager. Potentially someone like Ian Hazakostas perhaps, or even someone a bit lower down in general management position, someone who can then go to those teams and go, okay, well, we need to sort of get back together and sort this out because this is going to look a bit silly. So, yeah, disappointed on one hand from my point of view that this thing even exists. It does explain a great deal, but easy fix in my view. So we'll see what happens in future. Next one, this is again about player housing. This keeps cropping up. I'm quite pleased it keeps cropping up. So it says here, you're missing one key point why it might be bad. ERP. Imagine one creepy dude luring a child into an instance area, brackets his house. The thing is, that to me doesn't make sense, and I'll explain why. Obviously your house would be an instance area. But we have instanced areas in the game anyway. We have dungeons. I'm not even talking about the garrison. We have dungeons. They've been in the game forever. So, if you're talking about someone doing something... And also, you don't need to lure someone into an instance area anyway. If you're suggesting that if, someone's talking in a public area, people can overhear. Well, they can't because you have whispers in the game anyway. So I'm not quite sure whether this is someone just messing about. But... yeah, that's not an issue at all with player housing because, one, we already have instance areas where 2 people could go and not be observed by anyone. 2, people can whisper in a crowded area and no one has any idea what they're doing. Next comment. We have someone in our guild who started playing WoW for the first time after Legion came out. Where's that from? This is my response to it. For some reason, I've clipped out the response instead of the question. Never mind. I'll explain what it is. Someone was asking whether it's too late to get into raiding if you've only really started playing World of Warcraft in Legion. The answer is, of course, no, it's never too late. And this was my response, in fact, that there is actually someone in my guild right now who wasn't playing World of Warcraft. It wasn't just that he wasn't playing World of Warcraft before Legion came out. He wasn't even playing World of Warcraft when Legion did come out. It was like a month or 2 later. And he's been raiding with us for some months now. He started in Nighthold. So you can get yourself up to speed. Now, obviously, the more you know about MMOs in general, the faster you'll get up to speed because you already know some general things about stuff you'll have to work on. But, I mean, what you do, obviously, there's a learning process of, to get yourself up to speed there. But also to apply to a guild, you need some background. I mean, they're not going to be looking for past expansions type experience, but you need something in logs, something that lets them know that you will be able to cut it. Because although the greater risk is from the player trialing in a guild, guilds aren't dicks by and large. They're not going to mostly trial you unless they're reasonably confident it will work out, because they don't want to waste your time. Because it's easy from a guild's point of view. They could easily trial you one night and then after 10 minutes go, no, this guy's not going to get it. Or even after an hour or 2 hours or whatever it happens to be, and instantly drop you. But we don't want to do that as recruiters. That's not nice. So we want to have some confidence that you would be able to compete in our roster, so for which you're going to need logs. So there's going to be a step-up process. It doesn't have to be a long step-up process. You can get yourself into a heroic guild, do well in there, get some decent logs, get yourself into a mythic guild, that's a bit, or if it's so stunning in the heroic things and you're playing a class or spec that's highly desirable, you might get into a more advanced mythic guild anyway. But you sort of get yourself up there. Don't guild hop is what I would say to this. Don't keep jumping around guilds. Stay in there for a little bit, think long term, but it's certainly not too late to get into it. I mean, when I returned, I took an extensive break. I left after the first tier in Wrath and didn't come back until just before the last tier in Cataclysm. And I expected, I wanted to come back and get back into raiding, and I fully expected not to get into a decent guild until the next expansion. So I just consciously thought to myself, just do what I can, get myself ready. Next expansion, most things are reset anyway, just get into a guild then. I was quite fortunate in that I got into a heroic mode, which is what Mythic was called at the time. Guild, it wasn't a stunner, but it was decent enough and it was fun. The people there were great. So I was quite lucky there. You could argue I probably traded a little bit on my past experiences. But even without that, you can get into guilds. You just have to wait for openings, get in there. And it may not, but stay there for a few months at least. And then if you think that you are one of the better players in that guild and they're holding you back a bit, then you can maybe look to move on. Or you might actually decide that, there's a balance between progress and how much you enjoy a particular guild. It's always a risk moving to a guild. You might actually decide you quite like the guild that you're in at that time. So next one, this was quite an interesting one. It went on for a bit, but the first few comments are the more interesting ones. So it says, doing LFR in 2K17, blah, 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 waste of time playing with. My rogue disagrees. I've now done 3 the last few weeks and got quite a lot of good gear out of it. Very nice indeed. So what the argument is, and a lot of people have this argument at LFR, it says, who put zero interest in everything like walking zombies, hitting buttons, but zero thoughts about the encounter. The worst experience in the whole game is joining LFR. Now, I am a bit of a supporter of LFR, I have to say. It's not, from my own personal point of view, yes, I would not particularly want it in the game, but I see the benefit of it. And someone sort of said, don't do LFR then. Then the same person has sort of elaborated and says, obviously I'm not doing them, but just imagine you're a newbie, so they're doing it from the new player point of view, and you join for the first time to LFR. It can be an illusion what real content in the game is. Which is true. There is no getting away from the fact that some people, new people, I know this for a fact, because a couple of expansions ago, I remember when I transferred Realm to join a guild, I transferred with an alt a bit later on, but I didn't join the new guild straight away. I thought, this was at the time where guilds had certain benefits, like you'd get a certain proportion of like gold when people went out and did questing, looting mobs, stuff like that. So there was a benefit in people making their own guild and then grabbing loads of people into it, like cesspool guilds they were sometimes termed, because they were there purely for the guild master to rake in money. But I joined one of these because you used to get spammed all the time, so I joined one. And I used to observe conversations, and literally people thought that LFR was exactly the same as the hardest mode. I was talking to one guy, and he was saying it's exactly the same. He says, the only difference is you get better gear off the harder mode stuff. He literally just thought that the hardest mode stuff, which at the time was heroic, was the same as LFR, only the bosses had more health and they did more damage to you. They genuinely believed that. So yeah, sure, LFR doesn't really lead you into that. That being said, there are plenty of players who, if you removed LFR, and before LFR existed indeed, would not have done the other forms of raiding. So, which is why I am a supporter of it. I quite like the idea that it's just the dynamic of MMOs these days. It sounds paradoxical, but the dynamic of MMOs these days is lots of people play it single player point of view. I do the same in the other MMOs I play. Whether it's Star Wars, The Old Republic, Elder Scrolls Online, Lord of the Rings Online at the moment, whatever it is I've played, I play those as single player games. I don't really go for getting myself into groups in games that I play casually. I do in World of Warcraft because I'm putting the time in and much more invested into it. So it's nice that people have a button they can press to queue up with people and do group content. Yes, it's a shadow of its former glory, effectively, or its actual glory in the harder modes, but it's really useful for those players, I think. Anyway, that's my view. Next one, it says, I'm wondering if you have an updated guide for Mythic Plus for Rets in 7.2.5. I don't, but I shouldn't I? There's a couple of guides I should have out now, and it's really weird. So this is one. I think I do have some footage from last week, and I haven't done Mythic Plus this week, so maybe I'll do another one this week, and at least throw some thoughts in. I won't make it a long video, but yeah, I could offer some thoughts into it. Bearing in mind that I'm not a dedicated Mythic Plus player anymore. I do very few, and I don't push keys. I like to just do a few of them for fun, rather than see it as an outlet for competitiveness, because that's raiding for me. And the other one I should really do is, I said I would do trinkets, Tuma Sargeras trinkets. But what happened was I put it off until Tuma Sargeras was released, because they always nerf a really nice trinket. And I was waiting for them to nerf Infernal Cinders, and they never did. So I got caught out there. I caught on the hop, and I've just suddenly realised I completely forgot to actually do it, because I was waiting for them to nerf it before I did the trinket video, and they never nerfed it. So I should probably get on with that next week as well. So my list is mad. Do you know what? I was supposed to do so many things this summer, and I'm getting behind. I need to get myself into order. Next one, it says, I don't like the idea of scaling zones. Now, so I do, but there is one very valid argument against them, and this is it. So I'm going to just go through this one. So I don't like the idea of scaling zones. It removes the feeling of level progression and power progression. Going back to a zone like Hellfire and killing a Fel Reaver to get revenge for all the times it killed you while trying to level. How did the Fel Reaver kill people? People keep saying this, and I think to myself, how? Because the ground shook when it was near. It was like the Tyrannosaur in Jurassic Park. It was boom, boom, boom. So when it was anywhere near you, you knew it was there. You'd look for which direction it was in and leg it in the opposite direction. I never understood how people could die to it unless they just literally went AFK. But anyway, I get the point. So you'd know you'd kill it if it hit 2 times, blah, blah, blah. It's a good feeling that people won't get to feel if everything is scaled to you. This is true. This is absolutely a very genuinely valid argument against level scaling. But in my opinion, and it is just opinion, of course, I think the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. This is a disadvantage. But again, like I said, the purpose of leveling is to learn how to play your class, learn various aspects of the game, and learn the background to the game. And as I say, I don't think the leveling process should take as long as it does. I think it should be severely curtailed. I think there needs to be an innovative change in the way that leveling is done in MMOs in general. I think Elder Scrolls Online gets it dead right. How Elder Scrolls Online works, remember they've had a couple of expansions, you might say, since that game came out. The original level cap was level 50. That is still the level cap. It's level 50. So what you have instead is you have another form of progression which is called Champions Points. So you still sort of get experience at level 50, but they go into what are called Champions Points, which is like special. Every time you get another one of these levels, it's an extra sort of talent point thing that you can spend to make your character more powerful. But here's the really good thing. Those champion points are shared on all your characters on the account. So, for example, when I'm doing a Warden at the moment, which is not level 50 yet, when it gets to level 50, that's it. It's got its level cap, and it has the same champions points as the main character that was level 50 when the game first came, or very soon after the game first came out. And that's a good idea, I think. So when you bring out a new expansion, you bring out some of that progression. But that, so there's twin progression. There's getting to level cap, which is what you're doing just to learn the game. And then after that, you've got another form of progression, but that's shared across all your characters. So you can make a new character, get it to level 50, the rest of it's done. And then, of course, when you do get to level cap, you do find it easier to kill mobs and stuff because they stay as they are, but you're getting better in terms of your gear and more skill points and all the rest of it as well. So that's my answer to that one. I think that the leveling process shouldn't take as long. So that shouldn't be an issue. The fact that, yes, sure, you're not actually going to go up noticeably in power is definitely a thing, but it shouldn't take that long. And then you will notice it when you get to level cap. Next one says, I feel like Blizzard tried to do the whole locking cosmetics behind difficult content thing with balance of power, and lots of people complained that they didn't want to have to do mythic dungeons and normal raids. It works in LFR, I think, actually. But the mythic dungeons bit is a part of it, I think, isn't it? The WoW player base is too entitled for stuff like that. I don't think it's the WoW player base. I think it's just the way people are now. The old grindy type MMOs have gone. People want to get stuff fairly quickly. That is certainly true. With the cosmetic stuff, though, I don't think people would mind as much if there was some cosmetic stuff behind harder content, or at least content that required more effort to be put in. If there was a sliding scale of it, like there's too little customization in World of Warcraft. As I say, what people ultimately want, there's two things in any role-playing game. There's the power of your character and there's the look of your character. The power of your character is fleeting in World of Warcraft. Yes, people are gear horny, but then in a couple of months' time, that gear is worthless. When I left World of Warcraft initially, which was just before Ulduar came out, so I had the best gear that Naxxramas could provide, or version 2 of Naxxramas. I was really, really well geared when I left. Now, I came back on a casual basis in ICC, and I mean casual. That character then, that gear, was pants. I wouldn't have even been able to get into a normal mode pug with that gear. Not a cat in hell's chance. Because since I'd left, Ulduar had been and gone. Trial of the Grand Crusade, whatever the raid bit was called, which may well have been that, I can't remember. That had sort of been, ICC was just coming out. So, so yeah, my gear was absolutely worthless at that point. And that's how it is. But cosmetic is forever. When I left Lord of the Rings Online several years ago, I came back. I'm, at the time 30 levels behind level cap. It's now like, it would have been now 40 because expansion just come out. But 30 levels behind level cap. Gear a load of trash, but not for the level, but compared. But it still looked good. His cosmetic stuff was there. So what customization could there be? I'm not even talking about customization at character creation, although that is severely lacking. Just in terms of the gear. Blizzard already restricts the types of armor and equipment that we can wear. You're only allowed to transmog stuff that we could wear anyway, or that we normally would wear, because my paladin can wear cloth. I'm not allowed to transmog. into cloth. But it's not just about that. Like, other games have dyes and things like that. So let's say you like a particular piece of armour, but it doesn't quite fit your transmog. It's the wrong colour. The design's great, but it's the wrong colour. Well, in other games, you have dyes and you can recolour it yourself. You don't have to wait for Blizzard to get lazy and do a recolour of the same thing because they can't be bothered to think up a new armour system. No, you could recolour it yourself and make it fit. Transmog would be far better then, and it'd be far easier to make yourself look unique. And the final comment this week is again to do with raiding, class stacking this time. So it says, what makes me mad is the fact Blizzard forces mechanics that can't be tackled by every class. So you've got to bring rogues and others. You have to bench people for the wrong classes, blah, 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 blah. It's just true. Only in so many guilds. I think if guilds are doing that way behind the sort of progress curve, then they're just being a bit silly. Because there comes a point at which, you know, after the first top few hundred guilds, you can bring other classes. That being said, you can still do better to have the more optimal classes. This is true. And it's a difficult one to just criticise Blizzard about, though, because if you had a philosophy of saying we're not going to design fights such that some classes just look really good on it and others not, then you have to do one of two things. You either constrain the encounter designers and stop them designing what might be fun mechanics and fun designs, or you have to give every class and spec all the same utility abilities. You can call them different things and have them work slightly differently, but they'd essentially all you'd have to give everyone an interrupt on the same basic cooldown with the same range. You'd have to give everyone a movement speed increase of the same quality and the same number of movement speed buffs as well. You'd have to give everyone the same defensives. Everything would have to be the same. And Blizzard wanted to make a definite move away from that because they felt that it had got to the point where there was too much homogenization by MOP. I'm not sure I necessarily agree, but I take their point. So they've moved away from that. So they're certainly not going to do that either. So it's one of those things. I understand the difficulty Blizzard are in. I don't think they lightly design fights knowing that some classes are just going to be stacked by the top guilds and some are going to be left out. But I just think they see it as a necessary evil. And I find it very difficult to disagree because, as I say, you have got to do, to my mind, one of those two things. You've either got to say certain fight designs can't go ahead because this will happen. You've got to redesign it, and therefore you might redesign a less fun fight. Or, yeah, you're increasing homogenization of different groups. And that's just not the way it works in World of Warcraft. It is the way it could work in other MMOs. Again, use Elder Scrolls Online as an example. Because there, of course, you've got much greater flexibility. The class is much less restrictive. WoW, the WoW model is of very restrictive classes. That's what it brought to it. That's why so many MMOs adopted that model, because WoW was very successful with it. Now, whether they were successful because of that rigid class system or just in spite of it is a subject for debate, but there it is. So anyway, those are some of the more interesting questions. I do this each week, so I do try and keep an eye. It sort of encourages me to make sure I can read all the comments as well, because I do get quite a lot of them now. Apologies to any comments I don't necessarily reply to on YouTube, but I do at least try and read them and do try and respond when I've got quieter times as well. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much, and until next time, I'll see you later.